Welcome. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to discharge a patient. The most efficient way to discharge a patient is to do it as part of the workflow of your discharge summary documentation. You're encouraged to do your discharge documentation at the time of discharge, but if you are not able to complete it, at minimum, you need to open up the document and place your discharge diagnosis. You can then go into the discharge module and discharge the patient. The discharge summary will stay in a draft incomplete stage until you go back and complete it at a later time. You will be reminded by the system of documents that are in draft or incomplete state. However, as previously mentioned, we encourage you to complete the discharge summary at the same time as the discharge. I'm going to go ahead and begin the discharge process for this patient. To do so, I'm going to first start by opening up a discharge documentation on this patient. I'm going to click the document button at my navigation bar, and I'm going to select the discharge summary template. The discharge summary template is now presented on my screen. The discharge summary template has three main components: the discharge diagnosis, the summary or the course in hospital, and the discharge plan. It is encouraged that you fill this out at the time of the discharge of the patient. However, once this discharge summary is opened, you can go ahead and save it, and it'll save the document in a draft state. Therefore, at any time, as you can see here, you can go back to this draft discharge summary to complete it. I'm going to go ahead and click on the discharge summary again, and it's going to bring up that template that is now saved in a draft form. For the discharge diagnosis, I'm going to select the problem button that you see here, and it's going to bring up the list of the problems that I have had active on this patient during the visit. This patient diagnosis will be that of a non-STEMI myocardial infarction. I'm going to select that button here to add it, and I'm also going to select congestive heart failure as the patient develops some congestive heart failure while in hospital. By selecting this button here, this will also add it as the diagnosis on my discharge summary template. I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and you'll now see that the discharge diagnosis of non-STEMI and congestive heart failure has been added to my discharge template. If I wanted to add another problem to the discharge diagnosis, I can simply go back by clicking the problem button once again. And if it's a problem that has not been on the active problem list, or it's a new diagnosis that I want to add to the discharge template, I can search for it here. For example, if I wanted to add diabetes, I could select it here, select active, and add it to my template. And now diabetes has also been added as part of the discharge diagnosis. You have the option of putting some comments on the discharge diagnoses in the boxes that you see here. Or if you would rather put anything related to the diagnosis on the discharge of the patient in the course of hospital summary, you can do it in this section here as well. Or you can do a combination of both. I'm going to click on the summary button, and in this area it provides me some narrative boxes where I can go ahead and put in a dictation on the summary of the course in hospital for this patient. In the interest of time for the video, I'm just going to go into the box here and make a very quick note for the course in hospital. Patient presented with chest pain, had a positive troponin, angiogram done showed a blockage of the LAD, and the patient went on to have PCI with a stent. Patient did very well and recovered well in hospital. So now I have a quick little course in hospital summary placed. I'm now going to go back to the main template, And now I can actually go into the discharge plan. The discharge plan is where you're going to address the medication reconciliation as well as reconciling the active problems on the patient. It is also here within the discharge plan that you'll provide any instructions for the patient upon discharge, any follow-up in terms of outpatient clinics or office follow-ups, as well as the actual discharge order that will allow the nurse to go ahead and discharge the patient from the hospital. I'm going to go ahead and go into the discharge plan. I can either get into the discharge plan by clicking on it here within my template, or I can click the button at the top of the screen in the navigation bar that says Discharge. When I click on this discharge plan, it brings up the discharge plan template. The discharge template is a shared module that can be used by other providers that are associated with this patient. Other providers can go into this template and, for example, put in some instructions that they have for the patient related to their concerns of the care of the patient. The discharge plan has several sections that you need to fill out. This includes reconciling the active medication problems, any prescriptions that need to be done on the patient, including the medication reconciliation, and any instructions that you have for the patient. The actual discharge order to discharge the patient from the hospital is done by selecting this section here where it says Discharge Orders. You would not go into this section until which time is you're ready for the patient to be physically discharged from the hospital. By selecting this, you will then place the actual discharge order in the system. Until this discharge order has been selected and processed, you can go into this discharge plan and update it throughout the patient's stay in the hospital. The first thing I'm going to do is go into the Reconcile problems. The Reconcile problems will allow me to go in and clean up the active problem list. This is a very important step in the discharge plan as it allows the patient to have a very up-to-date active problem list. This will help for future visits to the hospital. I'm going to go ahead and click on Reconcile Problems, and it's going to bring up the active problem list. I'm going to make a decision with regards to these active problems that the patient had on this visit. The diabetes, I'm going to keep as an active problem. The non-STEMI, I'm going to keep as an active problem. And the congestive heart failure, I'm going to keep as an active problem. The chest pain that the patient came in with is now no longer an active problem because we know that that was the non-STEMI causing that. So I'm going to go ahead and select delete that problem. I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to give me a reason why I'm wanting to delete the chest pain as an active problem. I can go ahead and put in here doctor's order as a reason. And I'm going to hit save. And I've now reconciled the active problems on the patient. The next section, discharge transfer, will be used when you want to discharge the patient and then admit them to such areas as rehab or complex care. Other ambulatory orders is a section for booking outpatient clinic and office follow-ups. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the prescriptions. When I go into the prescription routine, it's going to allow me to reconcile the patient's home medications and active medications that were done while in the hospital. It would also give me an opportunity to add any other further prescriptions that I may want to put in for this patient. I'm going to go ahead now into the prescriptions. And it's going to bring me up into the Reconcile section of the prescriptions. This allows me to make some decisions on the home medications as well as any visit medications that were done in the hospital. For the home medications, the patient is taking the Lipitor and the metformin. I want them to go ahead and continue these medications when they're discharged from the hospital. I can do that by simply selecting continue. If the patient asks for a prescription for metformin because they have run out and they're not able to get to their family doctor for a little bit, you can go ahead and provide them a prescription for either of these two medications by simply just clicking on the little RX button here. Otherwise, a prescription will not be generated for these two medications. To go ahead and generate a prescription for the metformin if they do need a refill, you can click on the little RX. That will now provide the patient with the prescription for the metformin. You do have to put in a quantity of tablets that you want to give the patient. You can either do this as duration or quantity. The system will calculate this for you. I'm going to go ahead and give them 60 tablets. I am now presented over in the right-hand column any medications that were given to the patient during their visit. In this case, I only have one medication, that being the hydromorphone that I give the patient. I have to make the decision as to whether or not I want to continue this medication when the patient's discharged or stop it. Given this is IV hydromorphone, I'm going to stop this medication. However, if it were a PO medication or a medication that I did want the patient to continue while they were discharged, I could select continue. By selecting continue, it would then provide the patient for a prescription for this medication. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and stop this medication. I've now done the reconciliation of the home medications and any visit medications that were done while the patient was in hospital. From this screen, I can see that I am going to provide them a prescription for the metformin because they have run out of that one, but otherwise no other new prescriptions are going to be generated. If I want to add a new prescription to give to the patient upon discharge, I can do so by clicking the Add New button that you see here. I'm going to click the Add New button, and it's going to bring me into this module. Here, if I had any prescriptions that I commonly prescribe for a patient that I've saved as a favorite, they would be listed here, and I could simply select them from this screen. However, I want to give a new medication that I do not have saved as a favorite. To do so, I'm going to select Search Medications. This will bring me into the medication dictionary where I can select the medication that I want to prescribe. I'm going to select Dilaudid, and I'm going to pick the 2 milligram tablet. It's going to give me some options of order strings for this particular prescription that I can give. However, any of this can be edited once you're within the prescription. I'm going to pick the 2 milligram tablet Q6 hours PRN. When I select that, it's going to ask me for the quantity of tablets I want to give the patient. I'm going to go ahead and give them 30. Since this is PRN, they're going to ask what is the reason for PRN, and we can default it for pain. This is a prescription that I'm probably going to provide more than once for other patients, so I'm going to select the star. This will now save it as a favorite, so I do not have to look up this medication, and it will remember that I like to prescribe 30 tablets for a patient when I provide a prescription for the hydromorphone. This is the only medication I want to prescribe for this patient, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Q and exit. If I wanted to prescribe another medication, I could just hit Q, and it will provide me with the search box to now look up another medication. But since we're done, I'm going to hit Q and exit. By selecting the preview button, I can preview what I have decided for this patient. Here I can quickly see that the new medication that I have provided this patient that they were not on when they came into hospital is the hydromorphone PO tablet. I have also going to provide them with a prescription for it as noted by the little RX button. I've also continued their atorvastatin, which was one of their home medications, as well as their metformin. And I can see here that I'm going to provide the prescription for metformin as the patient had requested because they needed a refill. When I am happy with that, I can select Submit, and I can enter my PIN number. This will now take me back out to my discharge plan screen. I'm now going to jump down into the instruction box, and here I can provide the instructions that I have given to the patient. I'm going to put in here that I reminded the patient to follow up with the family physician in 2 weeks. And I've reminded the patient that they need to return to the hospital if they have any further chest pain or concerns. When the patient is discharged, a discharge packet will be printed for the patient, and the discharge packet will include the information that you see on this discharge plan. This will include a summary of their prescriptions, showing the reconciliation of what they are to continue and what they are to stop, as well as the instructions that you provide here. The referrals box that you see at the bottom is just for communication purposes. If you had the patient referred to a particular physician for follow-up after discharge, you could enter that information in this box here. However, it does not actually book the patient for any follow-up appointments. This section for referrals will likely not be used. If, however, you did want to book the patient into one of the hospital clinics or to an office outpatient follow-up referral, you do that through other ambulatory orders. I'm going to go ahead and click on other ambulatory orders, and I'm going to pull up the template that we have called outpatient clinic and office referrals. When you open this up, I would recommend that you star this as a favorite, so therefore you do not have to look it up next time, as this will be a template that you'll often be using for outpatient follow-up on a patient after their discharge from hospital. In this case, it'll populate their health card number, their phone number, and their family physician. Here, I can put in the name of the physician that I want the patient to follow up with in their office, or if it's an outpatient clinic, such as the orthopedics clinic or the urology clinic, I can do that by selecting the clinic in the drop-down box here. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and put an outpatient referral to the respirologist, Dr. Berg. And I have to put in urgency, and I'm going to say this can be 3 weeks or more, and the reason for the referral. Recent non-STEMI and history of COPD. Thanks for seeing regarding medication management for his COPD. Now, once I have the information in there, I can select Submit at the top of the screen. Type in my password once again, as this is another order that I'm placing. And I can now see that a referral to the outpatient office to Dr. Berg has been ordered for this patient. By selecting the More Detail button, you can see the information that we entered here for the reason for the referral to the outpatient office of Dr. Berg. This information will be printed in the discharge packet, and the patient will be aware of it. When we place the order here, it will go to the clerk, and the clerk will book the patient into the appropriate clinic or fax the referral off to the appropriate office. As we had mentioned previously, this discharge plan can be filled out at any time during the patient's stay. You may want to go in and start putting such things as the ambulatory orders for outpatient clinic follow-up or outpatient office follow-ups as they become evident that they need to have that during the patient's hospital stay. Now that we have all the information in the discharge plan and I'm actually ready for the patient to be discharged, I can now place the discharge order. By doing so, I just clicked Add New, and I select Discharge Order Routine, and I can provide some information here if I want to, such as discharge patient to family when they arrive at 5 o'clock. I submit that order by entering my password once again, and now the discharge order has been placed on this patient. The nurse will now be notified that the patient can be discharged home. The discharge packet will be printed by the nurses. However, we need to print the prescription so that we can sign it. To do so, you would select the printer that you see here, select Print Section, and you would click on Prescriptions. When you hit Print, it'll now bring up the discharge prescription that you can see here. When you click on it, you will see the discharge prescription for the hydromorphone and the metformin, and you can go ahead and print it and sign it and attach it to the chart or give it to the patient. When I'm done, I'm going to hit Save, and I'm going to go back out to my patient's chart. And that's how you do a discharge from the hospital.